are listening to the Insight to Action podcast. My name is Donna Jones. I'm your host. My work involves transforming leadership, skills, and decision-making mindset to really cope with the complexity we have in today's environment. Isaac Getz is the co-author of Freedom, Inc. and a professor at the ESCP. I don't know what those letters stand for. European School.
It's in French, École de Commerce, École Supérieure de Commerce de Paris. Means the high school for business, something like that.
Okay? Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also the visiting professor at Cornell and Stanford universities, as well as the University of Massachusetts. He's written Liberating Leadership, How to Build a Radical Freedom of Initiative Organization, which is a rather intriguing title. And particularly timely today when companies are exploring better ways to engage talent and become more responsive to the outside world. I've talked to World Blue. One of our episodes on this podcast is with World Blue. We've also talked about Holacracy, Sociocracy 3.0, Liquid O, and other governance structures. Isaac Getz talks about liberating employees. Welcome to the program, first of all, Isaac.
Hello, Donna.
Let's talk about why are more companies paying attention to employee engagement and how can liberated companies help?
My topic is liberating leadership, and what I studied in comparison to some other approaches that you mentioned is not exactly how these companies have to be organized, but how you go to transform them. This is the what's called in American $1 million question, right? So what we did in our research is that we went for 5 years and studied about 30 companies in 5 countries, and not companies, in fact, but the leaders, the CEOs that did this transformation. And we realized, and this is the answer to your question, that although there is a certain amount of them and there are lessons, and we can talk about it, about this liberating leadership, they are still a marginal phenomenon. What we wanted to do is to understand what the principles of transforming organizations, and then I write a book, I wrote also several articles, and try to show leaders or CEOs of organizations that they can do it too. And we realized, today that in France and Belgium, particularly in French-speaking Belgium, it became a real corporate liberation movement. It's not a marginal phenomenon anymore. There are hundreds and hundreds of organizations, including large corporations like Michelin and Decathlon and Airbus that build airplanes, who entered this type of movement and transformation. So today I can only see that there is a change. However, I think the need for this type of organizations existed at the moment of Industrial Revolution, because traditional organizations are not natural to human beings. They deny basically the fundamental universal human needs.
Well said. Now let's talk a bit about what inspired you to to understand more about liberating leadership in companies.
Again, as I told you, when I became interested in me and Brian Carney, with whom we carried this research in these organizations, and before that I worked on the companies which are creative, innovative. It's intriguing once you visit these companies, and obviously, naturally, particularly as a business school professor, you want to understand how it works. But rather quickly, after visiting several of them, we basically understood the essential tenets of this company's organization. What was mysterious is how these organizations were transformed from the traditional, what we call hierarchical bureaucracies, into this freedom and responsibility-based liberated organizations. And so that's why we became interested in the liberating leadership, because we very quickly saw that there was always one person one CEO or business unit, head of a business unit that decided to lead this transformation, becoming hence a liberating leader. And so we wanted to understand their lessons and to see if there are some kind of common lessons that eventually can be useful to every other head, CEO that want to do the same type of transformation.
What did you learn from your research then? Because this is an intriguing opening into what is perplexing a lot of companies right now, in the sense that a lot of these leadership positions, particularly the ones that are tied to decision-making authority, are actually the bottlenecks for innovation.
I think that the words matter, and I think that the word leader that is used in a common way, which is used as identical to somebody that sits at the top of a pyramid, is confusing. We wouldn't agree that Gaddafi was a leader in the sense that we use the term, right? Leader is somebody that people are voluntarily following. Now, Gaddafi was killed the moment when he lost the power to intimidate people by his former subordinates. So the leader that we are talking about are people who are, most importantly, egoless. They abandoned their ego and they started to be servants to their people. So every transformational leadership, let's say every transformation of type that we're talking about, we call it corporate liberation, which is kind of a radical form of transformation, starts by these executives, CEOs, questioning their own behavior. And one of the most important is their ego, their belief that they are the most intelligent people in the organization. And so that was for example, one you asked about the lessons, the things that we learned, that was one of the things that we learned, that these people had to do some fundamental work on themselves, right? Kind of self-help. Although it was not a self-help, most of them worked with executive coaches on these issues, and some even with the shrinks.
What prompts them to do that? Because that's not an easy journey. And I can recall at one point I challenged, a long time ago, I challenged an entrepreneur around the role of ego, and they defended the need for ego. The assumption was if you don't have an ego, you can't possibly be competitive. There's a lot of mental walls to get over when you're developing. So how do people approach that?
I would say that I agree with them, of course. I mean, if you evolve in the traditional paradigm of driving the performance of your organization from the top, your ego is obviously important. However, if you shift the paradigm, and those leaders did, and you understand that, like one of them said, 800 brains are more than one super brain, the question then is how you can make these people to open up, because they're like knocks, right? All their ideas they held it for themselves, they share it with their families, their friends. Eventually they leave you and they start another company that competes with yours, but in the company they don't share. They don't share their intelligence, they don't share their ideas. And so why? Because you, as a CEO, you show them on the daily basis that you are the most intelligent, and that means they are inferior, and people who are second class don't want to share their best ideas. So how do you change that? And it starts with you. There are different triggers why leaders change that. Some of them underwent some personal or family events. Some of them had their organizations that they believed are perennial competitors collapse. Some of them are simply were exposed to the writings or videos or examples that there is a different way to run an organization which is more in tune with their fundamental values and fundamental beliefs. So where they come from, there are different cases. I mean, it's this whole continuum of cases. But what's important that all of them understood that unless they learn how to trust other people's intelligence, nothing will happen. And so it's again fundamental leadership question is they understood that they can't transform their organizations if they don't transform themselves. And they did a real work on that. And you're absolutely right, Donna, that the difficulty is that you very quickly feel vulnerable, right? Because fundamentally trusting somebody is giving him, in a way, some keys, right, to your company, maybe to your life, because now he will decide or she will decide what to do, what equipment buy, whom to hire, because everyone believes that it will produce good results, but it can produce bad results. And so you are vulnerable. Parents know that too, right? When you, for the first time, give the keys of your car to your adolescent, how do you feel? But if you don't, if you always control your child, well, you'll pay the price later, right? You'll be always, until maybe this child will retire, the one who will make decisions for him and pay for him too.
You're getting into something now that is perplexing. Well, it's actually a weak area for many companies, and that is the skill to transform leadership transformation skills, because we have process to transform processes, but now we're talking about the human as a change agent. And I know in my own work with helping either individuals or companies scale their evolution, my conversation around ego has centered around the relationship between yourself and power. So how did that, I mean, I'm sure that's the whole business saying, well, let go of control and trust in other people. The way I've been positioning it is to understand who you are in your relationship to your ego. So at the highest level of your relationship with your ego, you have a high level of trust, not only in yourself, but in others. And at the lower level, you're competing for position. You're seeing other people as being threats. It's a very fear-based place. If we take a look at it through the lens of power and my relationship with personal power versus power over others, did anything in particular show up in the research you did?
I have a PhD in psychology, and there are different ways to define ego. So I'll be very clear, how do I define ego? Not that this person believes that they're the most beautiful, nice looking or whatever. It's just ego about their belief that they're the most intelligent. So they have this huge ego believing that they will be able always to find a better solution or make a better decision than their subordinates. And that makes their subordinates not willing to make decisions and to use their brain. Now, the power is absolutely related to this definition of ego. Why these people have this belief that they are the most intelligent, that they can make the best decisions, because they rose to the top of the pyramid, right? So they have the biggest power, and power to do what? Power to make decisions, right? It's not the power to choose the biggest chair or the corner office, right? The power to make decisions. And so it's not easy. It's a big shift, although should be easy because it's common sense. The CEOs don't have any power. Clients have. If clients stop buying or coming to this company, the company collapses. So from there, you ask the next question, well, clients are not within the company. We can't do anything about it. But if you think about people who work in the company, then who are those who are the closest to the client? Obviously, frontline people, not the CEO. So they by proxy from the clients who have the real power, they are the most powerful people. Then they can serve well the client and make this client willing to come again. to buy more, willing this client to tell that this is a great company, that I admire this company, and so on and so on. So if you understand that, if we talk about the power, right? So then the question, you say, how can I basically create conditions where the people who have the real power in my company, the frontline people, the people who create economic value, can really exercise it? And if you look at the way traditional organizations are run, these people are powerless. They can't decide what they want. They have to ask always the permission from their supervisor. What every one of us are doing when we have to talk to somebody, the sales representative in a call center. The guy reads a protocol and then will say, okay, can you pass me your supervisor? Because we know how it works, right? So they are helpless. They are helpless. Unless you work in the organizations which are liberated companies like USAA, for example, where a guy decides to stay 4 hours with you to solve your problem, it's his decision. It's a lot of investment, right? Time, energy, but it's their decision. They don't have to ask anyone. They just stay with you until your problem is solved, period.
If I were to walk into a company that's been, a liberated organization, what would it look like? How would an employee experience that, or how?
If you walk as an employee, right, so there are a lot of things that will be unusual. And again, everything that I'm telling you, it's not necessarily that in every single liberated company you find them. But first of all, you park your car where you want. If you come early, you probably will be the closest to the entrance. Once you can walk then and see the CEO parking next to you and walk and chat with him. You will look probably very similarly dressed. Once you get into a company, you won't find a time clock. You'll probably have a nice chat with some colleagues. You may find some nice areas where, maybe somebody thought that it would be nice to put a fruit bowl next to the mail room. Now today there are less mail rooms, right? But some places where you can chat and nobody would pass by and saying, it's like 9:10 and you're still standing here and chatting with somebody. Then you'll probably find yourself in the dynamic office space where you will pick your place depending on with whom you want to spend time this day sitting next, or maybe you have a call, so you'll find an isolated room where you can go and have a call. You'll probably find what's formally called executives, but would be leadership people with the largest leadership responsibilities sitting next to you and conducting maybe conversations about millions or tens of millions without trying to hide any information. You would have a possibility to get all the financials of the company. You would be perhaps invited to assist if you want into the executive board meetings that may have several seats available to anyone who wants to assist, although obviously you would need to sign in and put your name in advance. You could get the minutes, right, the direct transcription of everything that was told in executive committee by mail from the CEO a couple of hours after the meeting is finished. You would probably even have your CEO coming to you and a little bit, I would say, using his authoritarian approach at one moment, if it's past 6 p.m. and you're still at work.
Meaning they would direct them to go home and have a life.
Right, because people love so much their work, they don't want to go home. And particularly younger people, they forget it. So there is, as you understand, practically no top-down behaviors, but this one may be necessary because, passionate people that get involved in project or something that they started by themselves, sometimes they forget that there is also life beyond the professional life, right? The life at work. So I just described some of the aspects. Now, if you're a CEO, so that's an employee, right? And you obviously can discuss with anyone, reach anyone, have an access to any information, start proposing initiative, take a decision, and so on and so on. Participate in a lot of work groups, right, on different issues. How do we hire? How do we invest? How do we compensate? And so on and so on. If you are a CEO, you say, what would be the experience of CEO who comes on a daily basis to his company? I think, first of all, he or she won't. They won't come on a daily basis. Because if they succeeded to liberate their companies, they're not needed anymore on a daily basis.
They become liberated.
In a way, I mean, there's one thing that you say that in order to liberate your company, you needed to liberate your company from yourself as a CEO. And liberate you also yourself from the company. There's a kind of like, it's like psychotic bond, between the two. But in fact, it's not that you're doing it in some kind of brutal way in one day. In fact, as you give people authority to make their own decisions, to organize themselves, self-direct themselves in teams, to making decisions, taking initiatives for the best of company's vision, you don't need to stand behind their backs. You just have to get away and let them play, right? Let them act. So what you do then, when they take more and more of authority and responsibility for running the things, your role is double as a liberating leader. It's the question of you're in charge of the vision. Sometimes you elaborated it on your own. Sometimes it was elaborated together with employees, but you are still in charge to see whether it's relevant. If a company decided, let's say you were in grocery business, to do certain things, and that was their vision and dream, and that was valid up until 1 week after Amazon buys Whole Foods, is it still valid? It's your responsibility to ask these questions, right? To bring this information inside the company to think about. And for that, you don't have to be inside. You have to spend a lot of time outside, right? And the second thing is why you need it still to come to company from time to time is the question of these values and behavior norms that replaced hierarchies and procedures and kind of provide a framework for behavior of people. If the employees decided at some point that they want to build organization around things like trust, respect, fairness, this kind of things, then you are the ultimate guardian that everyone respects these values. And in fact, some will abuse, obviously, right? And they may be disciplined by their teams, but sometimes they don't. And so if this information comes to your ear, you have to act, because basically these people trying to destroy the very fabric of the culture that together with employees you are trying to build for years, right? So you have to act. So that's basically what you need it for. And when you come in from time to time, you sit next to others and you chat, you try to touch as many people as possible, asking them, can I help you with anything? And like behave as a servant leader, right? Show them that you're interested basically in them and that you know what they're doing, and telling them concrete things, not general things. You're doing a great job, Bob, No. I know that last week you closed this deal, Bob. I've seen what you did. And what you did is really exceptional, because this client, not an easy client, something specific, right? And that's how you touch people and show that you care and let them do their work.
How do decisions get made? Are they made differently than what we'd see in a traditional organization?
Obviously. Decisions are made by those who are closest to the field, to the ground, right? So it's sometimes called subsidiarity principle, right? So the people who do, they know better. So the whole approach is they push all the decisions as I don't like the word down, right? But the closest to the ground, to the frontier. Give you an example, and obviously you don't do it by some kind of decree, right? But let's say that in the process of transformation, of liberation, at some point teams say that basically our recruitment process is slow and sometimes it stinks because we get people that are, don't fit, and then we need to spend time with them and so on and so on. And so they are questioning one of the business processes in the organization. So basically the approach is, okay, what do you propose? And they sit and they devise, and usually they decide some way in which they are involved in the recruitment, either from A to Z or at least partially, right? So this will be a totally different decision from a traditional company. These guys will say, you know what? We think that there will be a hike in 2 weeks of, delivery, and we need one additional guy for 2 months. And so they sit and they decide how they will find this guy, how they will interview him, and then obviously the contract issue goes through some kind of HR people who are specialists in that. Most of these decisions will be made by the team itself, including eventually to keep this guy longer if he did a good job, or to terminate perhaps if he doesn't. So that's very different.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That's a very excellent insight into what we're talking about here. So we've been talking about this conceptually. Globally, we have different cultural environments that bring both political context as well as economic context into the conversation around or into the actual doing, the decision to move toward being a liberated company. What have you learned from looking from your field research in companies across and around the world?
The one most important thing that I learned, which is not big news, that people are people all over the world. If somebody can show me a country or region where people like not to be trusted, cheated upon, information hidden from them, punished, I'd like to visit this place. In fact, I don't, right? I don't want to visit that place, but I think that place doesn't exist. And so people all over the world, and the research by Deci and Ryan, and we dedicated chapter on this, on the sort of intrinsic motivation and self-determination theory. They showed that people all over the world, and they did this empirical research in many, many countries, have the same needs, same universal needs. So everywhere it can work, right? What you realize from that is that traditional organizations are not natural to human beings because they deny universal fundamental human needs. And so the question is then, how do you build organizations, a work organization that is natural to human beings? And the only way to do it, is to do it with these people. There is no model, there is no social engineering, there is no method that says this is the way how to do that, because it's fundamentally disrespectful for the people who will work or are working there. Ask them what kind of organizational practices you feel as mistrustful, and they will tell you. Some people will say, time clock stinks. Other people will say, what does it mean 5 signatures to buy a $50, computer accessory? And some people say, why don't they trust us to hire? And so on and so on. So it can be very different in different organizations, and it can evolve too, right? At some point, they can question some practice, and maybe 1 year later another. So what you get, and this is very important to understand, that this whole corporate liberation is a philosophy. It's not a model, it's not a method. And there's a certain amount of beliefs, right? And these beliefs that people prefer rather to to evolve in the freedom and responsibility based organization, the majority of people, because it satisfies their fundamental human needs, then brings every CEO, every head of a business unit to this responsibility. It's his responsibility to start this liberation by co-constructing or co-designing, if you want, together with employees, a unique, really unique organizational mode or form of functioning that will fit them at that moment and that will look to them as being natural to them.
So let's look at it from a business performance standpoint. How does liberating leadership or liberated companies, what does it do to the overall position and performance of a company?
The first thing I can tell you that if you start by that as an aspiring liberating leader, it's stillborn, your liberation. You can right away forget about succeeding in corporate liberation. This is a very important point. It's often misunderstood. You are not starting corporate liberation to get more growth or more profits. You are not. You are doing that because, remember, I told you it's a philosophy, because you fundamentally believe that human beings deserve, whether at home or at work, to have their universal human needs satisfied. Now, it happened that you're not in charge of their home, you're in charge of their work life. And you decide that it's your responsibility to create such an organizational mode and form. Now, that said, but it's very important, this belief, right? That said, you, as the person in charge of the economic organization, I want to precise also that it's not only happening in companies, but also in public sector, in health organizations, in municipalities, in subsidized housing projects, and so on and so on. So it can be not necessarily only in businesses, right? But there is some kind of performance that you are accountable for. And this is another belief. Again, it's a belief. You can't demonstrate it, but it's almost a common sense. If you create an organization where people in the morning when they wake up are willing to go, and once they are there are willing to do their best to fulfill this company's vision, for sure these people will be more performing. Think also that they by themselves devise the best ways to achieve the results that they are responsible for. So fundamentally, you get as a byproduct, not as a goal, not as an end in itself, but as a byproduct of the fact that people are really enjoying and having fun at this workplace because their needs are satisfied, you get a higher performance. And what we saw, I studied about, I told you 30 companies, but right now, the project ended at 2009, but we're 2017, and I personally know several hundred companies that I kind of follow that did their liberation more recently than those that I studied, right? I studied companies like W.L. Gore, right, that operating that way since 1958, right? But now I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of organizations that have maybe between, I would say, 1 and 5-6 years of corporate liberation. And what you can see is that at minimum, they are outperforming their competition. If the times are good, they're doing well better than the average. If the times are bad, they're still making the ends meet, while their competition is either dead or dying. So that's basically what you see. And it's again, common sense, common sense. If you have your workforce that is 9-to-5 workforce, and every moment there is some challenge, people just sit and wait for their boss to tell them what to do. Can you imagine ice hockey playing that way? that the guy, the moment that, it's for him to play, he stops and he says, boss, what should we do? And they say, we'll call a meeting on Monday, between the forwards and, there's a head of forwards and there's the head of the defenders, and we'll have this meeting and we'll tell you what to do. You sit, meantime, you wait. I mean, ice hockeyers playing like that, basketball players are doing that. No one is doing that. When you have a ball, they expect you to make a decision. You dribble, you pass, you shoot. You're not asking your coach, your boss, what to do. But I don't know where it came from that in organizations we believe that the people that are on the ground, on the field, they're stupid. And every time there is some challenge, we need to tell them what to do. So liberated companies, they don't operate on these beliefs. They operate on beliefs that the closest to the field know better.
Excellent. Nice summary. Any tips or advice for listeners in this transformational process that companies and people are immersed in?
I think there can be two types of listeners. There are, I hope, some CEOs. And so I don't give advices. There are no advisors, no consultants, basically, in leadership, right? So I don't know any consultants in leadership, right? But I can tell that what I observe right now in France, Belgium, but also in many other countries, because it's happening all over, including the United States and Canada. I'm coming to Canada in a certain amount of months to address hundreds of Canadian CEOs on this topic in Montreal. So I can tell them one thing is that there is another way to run a company. And if you, as a CEO, you feel there is something wrong in the way you live your professional life, there is some kind of disconnection between your values that you live in your personal life and you cannot leave them. You have to leave them at the door of the company in your professional life. There is another way to organize a company. I don't say that liberated companies is the only way, but it is a way to create some kind of harmony in your own life. So you don't have to have two lives. You can have only one life. Now, that's for CEOs. Now, if I address the employees, the managers, I have now many examples of employees and managers who were sort of change agents. They don't have the power to transform their organizations, but they brought this idea, this information. Some put my book, incognito on the desk of the CEO, and then they came later and say, wow, you're reading this book, I read it too, So kind of different approaches, but basically they can bring this knowledge and this information in the company to the attention at some point of the CEOs. And it happened already on several occasions that then the CEO becomes interested and he starts perhaps to move into that direction. So you can do things too if you're even not a CEO right now.
Thank you, Isaac. Anything you'd like to add?
I can tell you one thing is that I think I'm a lucky person in the sense that I did this research and I wrote this book, Freedom, Inc., and published this article on liberating leadership in California Management Review in 2009 both. And, I'm passionate about the topic, but I didn't believe in my wildest dreams that something that I'm observing right now in France and Belgium, where you have hundreds and hundreds of organizations, companies in private and in public sector, as large as multinationals as Michelin or French Social Security, joining this corporate liberation movement. And in fact, I'm living, it's like a dream, right? It's the first time in human history, first ever, that something that people beginning from McGregor, right, with Theory Y, dreamed about, creating organizations which are natural to human beings, based on freedom, based on freedom of initiative, right, on trust, on fairness, and all these things, that it's happening not as marginal exceptions, but something that became the most, right now, the most important corporate movement in France. Is the most talked about. It's like it's on the evening news, of the top channels. It was on like ABC, Nightline, CBS, 60 Minutes. It's like everywhere. It's starting now to get in UK, and I hope that will go farther away into the Anglo-Saxon world. Thanks maybe to you, Donna.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's the purpose of running podcasts like this for 10 years now, is to help get the word out and advance awareness. And I need to thank Gilles Cypri, who is in Paris as well, because Gilles and I met when I was in Paris in January, and he told me about your work. And I'd heard about you before, but Gilles speaks so passionately about the work and the effect of the work you're doing and how it is spreading, that I thought we just had to have this conversation. And of course, Gilles came to me via Thomas Uli in Germany. It's an amazing network of people that we have working together from the outside and from the inside to really help companies adapt and to become extremely agile in the face of some exciting conditions that call for that liberation. I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you very much. And I see that you got contaminated by a French guy, right? And it's again one more example. Is basically that you can't avoid in France if you come, and in French it's called entreprise libérée, right?
Yeah.
And in English, liberated company. But in France, if you tell entreprise libérée, this like you start talking, and if somebody doesn't know what is it, like people look at him and say, like, you don't know who is Opera? It's like you don't know anything, basically, right? So it became so kind of like present. I'm not saying, attention, that every company is doing that, but it's on the agenda of a lot of companies, and they have a lot of meetings. I'm spending maybe a third of my time just chatting and drinking, not alcohols, but drinking some tea and coffee with a lot of executives who are interested to understand what can they do, how can they move in that direction. So I hope it will reach across Atlantic, over the pond, like we say, and contaminate more and more organizations in United States and Canada.
Well, thank you, and thanks for your contribution to the program. I know that's my aspiration, is that we have a lot of companies that are activated to become part of this global change in terms of workplaces, great workplaces, and how workplaces work to be more human, to really ensure that we're creating human-centered workplaces, because then everything else can follow. You've got health, you've got opportunity to create and innovate and respond quickly and rapidly to surprises. So, yeah, thanks for your part in this, and thanks for being on the program, Isaac.
Thanks a lot, Donna, for your program. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this program. Lots of good stuff in here. There's self-managed, more information on self-managed companies, leadership skills, and so forth on the Evolutionary Provocateur podcast, which sits on iTunes. I don't have control over that content, but you can see it on iTunes. So in addition, of course, there's the rest of the episodes on this program, the Insight to Action podcast, which is also on Google Voice and a few other platforms. My name is Donna Jones. My work involves decision making. I wrote Decision Making for Dummies, which is really a more advanced book for decision makers. In today's world, I also write for the Great Workplace Cultures, Huffington Post, monthly, and of course have this podcast as well. In addition, I do work with companies on their decision making, particularly the mindset required to handle complexity and uncertainty. And I do also a lot of coaching work, particularly with those really deep inner skills that people need to use today when uncertainty rules, and there's just really no way of understanding what the future is going to bring. So it's the deep inner skills, actually the same set of skills we talked about in this program. So thanks for listening. Please share this program, review it, support it. Really would appreciate that. Thanks very much.